There will be a moment when you look at your life and nothing appears to have changed. No signs, no movement, no confirmation. And if you do not understand what this moment truly is, you will misinterpret it as failure. But tonight, you are here to discover something few ever realize. The moment nothing seems to happen is often the moment everything has already changed. By the end of this journey, you will recognize the invisible shift and understand why silence is not absence, it is rearrangement. Stay with me, because what you are about to hear was never meant to be obvious. There is a moment on every conscious path that feels eerily quiet, not peaceful, not satisfying. Quiet in a way that makes the mind uneasy. The moment when effort has stopped, checking has stopped, forcing has stopped, and yet the outer world has not responded. This is the moment most people interpret incorrectly. They say, "Nothing is happening," but that statement is never true. Something is always happening. The problem is not that nothing is happening, it is that nothing is happening where you are looking. Neville Goddard warned about this stage, though he rarely emphasized it directly. He understood that the human mind is conditioned to trust movement more than alignment, to trust noise more than order. So when the noise stops, the mind panics. It asks, "Did I do something wrong? Did I stop too early? Should I try again? Should I force something?" This is the moment where people undo the work, not because the assumption failed, but because they abandoned it at the threshold. Helene Hadsell experienced this stage repeatedly. Between winning one prize and another, there were often long stretches of apparent normalcy, no excitement, no visible progress. But she did not interpret stillness as absence. She understood something profound. The outer world does not respond immediately to a new identity. It reorganizes. Reorganization is not loud, it is structural. Think of a building being reinforced internally. From the outside, nothing appears to change, but inside, beams are being repositioned, support strengthened, load redistributed. To interrupt that process because you see nothing is to weaken the foundation. This is the invisible shift, and it only reveals itself after it is complete. The mind, however, is impatient. It wants evidence. It wants reassurance. It wants signs. But signs belong to the old identity. The new identity does not need them. This is why Neville said that faith is loyalty to an unseen reality, not blind hope, loyalty. Loyalty when nothing confirms you. Loyalty when silence stretches. Loyalty when the old world has ended, but the new one has not yet appeared. This is not punishment. This is transition. The old assumptions are dissolving, the new assumptions are settling, and during that overlap, the world feels strangely empty. People mislabel this emptiness as nothing happening, but emptiness is space, and space is necessary for rearrangement. Now pause here. If you are in this moment where nothing seems to be moving, do not rush past this recognition. This is not the moment to act. It is the moment to remain. Remain loyal to the state you have chosen. Because the greatest mistake made here is trying to fill the silence with effort. Effort at this stage reintroduces the old identity. And the old identity recreates the old results. This is why so many people cycle endlessly. They never allow the invisible shift to complete. Now let me speak to you directly. If you feel a quiet discomfort right now, if something in you feels suspended, that is not failure. That is evidence that the old framework has loosened. The discomfort comes from the mind losing familiar reference points. And when reference points dissolve, identity is being rewritten. This is sacred territory. So mark this moment gently. Within the comments, write a simple phrase, No explanation, no elaboration. Something is shifting. Not as a declaration of faith, as a recognition of reality. Because naming the shift helps you stop resisting it. Now continue with me. The human nervous system has been trained to equate movement with safety. If something is happening, we feel in control. If nothing is happening, we feel exposed. This is why stillness triggers anxiety. But stillness is not stagnation. Stillness is integration. When identity shifts, the subconscious begins to reorganize perception. This does not produce fireworks. It produces subtle changes in how you interpret the world. You may notice, old desires feel less urgent. Old fears feel strangely distant. Certain habits lose their grip. Conversations no longer resonate. These are not losses. They are signs of reorientation. But because they are quiet, people overlook them. They keep waiting for a big moment. Neville explained that creation does not announce itself. It reveals itself retroactively. You notice it after the shift has already occurred. This is why so many people say, looking back, everything changed then. At the time, it felt like nothing. Now consider this carefully. If something truly new were forming in your life, would it look familiar? Of course not. So why expect it to appear in a recognizable way? The invisible shift dismantles familiarity. It dissolves the emotional charge of the old story. This is why people feel strangely neutral during this phase. Not happy, not sad, neutral. That neutrality is powerful. It means the old emotional anchors no longer define you, but the new ones have not yet crystallized. This is a liminal space, and liminal spaces are uncomfortable only because they cannot be controlled. Helene did not rush through this space. She trusted it. She understood that silence meant the assumption was sinking. Like dye diffusing into water, the change was spreading evenly, not explosively. Now here is a crucial insight. The invisible shift happens when you stop looking for it. The moment you stop scanning reality for confirmation, the subconscious relaxes. And when it relaxes, reorganization accelerates. This is why Neville emphasized rest, not physical rest, mental rest. Rest from interpretation, rest from evaluation, rest from expectation. Expectation is subtle pressure. Pressure delays. Silence removes pressure. Now, if you find yourself wanting to do something during this quiet phase, notice that urge. Do not act on it, just observe it. That urge is the old identity trying to reassert control. But control is not creation, allowance is. Now, at this stage in the journey, some people feel called to support themselves with structure. Not to force change, but to prevent interference. If that resonates, there is a 21-day challenge linked in the description and pinned comment. It is not a solution, it is a container. Now return with me. Because the most important realization about the invisible shift is still ahead. The invisible shift always leaves clues, not in circumstances, in perception. You may notice, you react differently to the same triggers. You no longer argue internally the way you used to. Certain worries feel irrelevant. You feel less compelled to explain yourself. These are not random changes, they are structural. They indicate that identity is reorganizing. The outer world lags behind because it is an echo. It cannot change until the internal environment stabilizes. This delay is not punishment, it is calibration. Imagine tuning an instrument. There is a moment when the string feels loose, not tight enough to play, not broken, loose. That looseness is temporary, but if you tighten too quickly, you snap the string. This is why patience here is essential. Patience is not waiting, It is non-interference. The invisible shift requires neutrality, not excitement, not desperation, neutrality. This is why Neville said, "The feeling of the wish fulfilled is relief." Relief is neutral. It is the absence of tension. Now notice this. If you truly believed the change was complete, how would you behave right now? You would not scan for evidence, you would live. And living is the signal that integration has occurred. Helene lived normally during these phases. She did not hold herself back. She did not try to be patient. She simply trusted that silence meant movement elsewhere. This is why her manifestations often arrived suddenly, not gradually, because they were gradual internally and sudden externally. The invisible shift finishes quietly. Its effects appear loudly, but only after the internal reorganization is complete.
Now let me say something clearly.
If you interrupt this phase, you do not speed things up. You reset them. This is the cost of impatience. So if nothing seems to be happening, that may be the strongest evidence that the assumption has taken root. Because once roots are forming, nothing appears above ground. Only after the roots are secure does the surface change. Now sit with that image. You do not dig up seeds to check if they are growing. You trust the process, and trust is not passive. Trust is disciplined stillness. At some point, without warning, life responds. Not gradually, decisively. A conversation shifts, an opportunity appears, a door opens without resistance. And only then do you realize the change happened long ago. The silence was not absence, it was alignment. This is why the final lesson of Neville's work is not about manifestation. It is about faithfulness to identity in the absence of evidence. Because once identity is stable, evidence has no choice but to follow. If you are in the silent phase now, understand this: you are not behind, you are not early, you are not wrong, you are between worlds, and that is not a mistake. That is transformation. If you feel calmer now than when you began listening, that is not coincidence. That calm is the new baseline forming. This channel exists to help you recognize these moments, not rush through them. If you wish to stay aligned with this path, you may subscribe, not as an obligation, but as a continuation of awareness. Because once you recognize the invisible shift, you stop fearing silence. And when silence no longer frightens you, life moves faster than ever before. Not because you demanded it, but because you finally allowed the unseen to finish its work.